diverse books for a wide array of readers, and COO of the nonprofit We Need Diverse Books. Woo! She is the co-author of the Tiny Pretty Things series and the author of the best-selling fantasy novel The Bells. Zoraida Cordova is the author of urban fantasies, the Vicious, it's like graduation, the Vicious Deep trilogy and the Brooklyn Brujas series. Her short fiction appears in the best-selling anthology Star Wars from a Certain Point of View and Toil and Trouble. The first book in her Brooklyn Brujas series, Labyrinth Lost, won an International Latino Book Award, was named a Best Book of 2016. This week we're celebrating the release of the second book in the series, Bruja Born, about a Bruja who raises the dead in an attempt to save the boy she loves. Zoraida is also the author of the upcoming Hollow Crown. They're joined tonight by two special guests. Laura Sebastian is the author of a YA fantasy series that kicked off with her first book, Ash Princess, which centers on a diminished yet vengeful princess and her path to inciting rebellion. Tochi Onyebuchi holds a BA from Yale, an MFA in screenwriting from Tisch, a master's degree in global economic law from l'Institut d'études politiques, and a JD from Columbia Law School. His writing has appeared in Asimov's and Idiomancer, among other places, and his Nigerian-influenced YA fantasy kicked off last year with Beasts Made of Night, in which corrupt mages can magically call forth sin from a sinner in the form of sin beasts, lethal creatures spawned from feelings of guilt. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dhonielle Clayton, Laura Cordova,
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness. Hi guys.
You have to get us started because this is your event.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm like flabbergasted at this point right now. We were just talking about how Tochi does the most.
Yeah.
With that introduction, it was just like, oh, and he has this degree and this degree and this degree, and I'm like, oh, we all feel so inferior now.
It's the most Nigerian thing ever.
We should have never let you on the set.
To just get a bunch of degrees and then, do the JD and not actually be a practicing attorney.
Our families.
We just, splitting the difference.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're like, hey, what if I were an author?
If this is any taste of the night, it's going downhill.
I would like to point out that I have a theater degree, and it's very important to me.
I don't have one theater fan.
There we go. Thank you. It's not in my bio or anything, but I have it.
You need to put it in your bio.
I should put it in my bio, especially anytime I'm on a panel with him. It's going in my bio.
All CDs attached.
Yes, exactly. I am going to moderate tonight. I have some fun questions for you guys. It's my first time moderating.
Woohoo! You got this.
So let's hope to kick it off. So for those of you who, for some reason, don't know, Bruja Born came out on Tuesday, so that's but yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really glad it's on June 8th because it is my 8th novel so far.
Wow.
And I don't know. I've basically been in this writing cave. I'm like that line from Hamilton, writing like you're running out of time. And I think that I feel that way always. I just keep thinking of stories and they just keep coming out, and I have no social life, so that helps.
Hashtag relatable.
I'm really excited to be here with you guys, so thank you.
So I love all of your books, and one thing that I've noticed that's a common theme through all of them is family. And whether it's the family you're born into in the Brooklyn Brujas series, or the family we choose in Beasts Made of Night, or the family in the Bells that's a little bit of both. So how did you approach those complicated relationship dynamics when you're writing these stories?
Zoraida has to go first because it's her night.
But
I have time to think.
We've been on, this is our 4th stop on our tour, and so this is basically what it's been.
Oh yeah.
And we still have 10 stops left. So.
Torture. She keeps catching me on Instagram,
Follow me on Instagram so you can watch Dhonielle Caught Off Guard.
She got me in my scarf the other night, and I was like, bitch, don't put that on Instagram! I'm
VH1 behind the books.
It is behind the books. It's a grand old time.
Okay. Back to the question.
What was the question about family?
About family.
So when it comes to writing about family, I come from a large Ecuadorian family. I grew up in Ecuador. I grew up in Queens, excuse me. I was born in Ecuador. And I have to just make that really clear so that people know I'm from Queens.
Coffee from Queens.
Coffee from Queens, where we drink water. And writing about family is always a big part of my books. And it's important in YA because I feel like in YA, we always leave out the family parts for the most part. You know, like you just have these parents that are mysteriously gone. And where I come from, and I think that a lot of like ethnic kids can relate to the idea that if you were in a vampire story, you're not actually leaving your house to go meet up with your friends and have shenanigans. It's like, where are you going? Who are you going with? Can I talk to their mom? And so how does that magic change in an urban fantasy that is about a Latinx family that is sort of from everywhere? They don't have one origin, because I feel like in the United States, Latinx people are just sort of mushed together, and when you're mushed together, you're all considered the same thing. So in my book, and I'm like, okay, so we're all the same thing. What does this magic look like if we're all in one? The sisters in my book all have different kinds of powers because they're each a different kind of girl. And I wanted to write about girls who are completely different from each other, but somehow they all make the exact same mistake. And they make mistakes based on their feelings, because when you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl, which is what all of the ages are of my main characters, you're gonna strike first with the thing that hurts you the most. And I think that makes for really good fiction, because you're exploring who you are, what you want, and how you're going to get it. And I think that gives girls agency.
In the Belles, you've got a group of sisters, and they're all the same, but they're not the same. And they're all raised together. They're almost like a large group of twins, right? Except there are like 6 of them. All born at the same. Yes, I mean it is. 6 tuplets.
They're like twins, but 6 of them.
Yeah. I don't do that. And I grew up with a brother who's really annoying, so I didn't
Me too.
I didn't have a sister. He's here.
Batman.
Yes. Hi, brother. And I grew up with just him bothering me, and I thought it would be great to have a sister. And so I always write about sisters, even though I didn't have one. I sort of have one now. Someone is my sister, and I harass her. But she's in front. I'm really interested in what happens to groups of girls when they're in families, when they have to compete, when they have to do some of the same things, and how their personalities sort of shape around each other. And when thrown all together, how do they protect each other as well? So I think in terms of the family is untraditional, but it's definitely something that I'm very curious in that dynamic.
You're nicer than I am, because I have a little brother and I didn't write sisters. I just wrote only children. So you're a lot nicer than I am.
Was that wish fulfillment?
I guess. But yeah. What about you, Tochi?
For me, a lot of the idea of family comes from shared experience. So, the vast majority of my time growing up, the only other Nigerian Americans I knew were somehow related to me. Either like actually by blood, or in that Nigerian fashion where anybody who's a friend of your parents is your aunt or uncle. So like there was nobody that I could really, and also there were these little kids and then adults. So like I had no contemporaries. And it wasn't until I got to college that I met other Nigerians and Nigerian Americans my age. And what was fantastic about that is that all of a sudden I had all these people I could relate to about like getting whoopings and, eating fufu, and the way our parents would talk shit about us at home, and then as soon as they were out of the house, they would brag to the high heavens about what brilliant children they had. A lot of this upbringing that I had previously considered unique, a lot of which shared qualities with sort of being in the foxhole, next to your fellow soldiers in the midst of World War I. All of a sudden, I had that with a whole bunch of other people. You know, it's a similar thing with, you know, law school, for instance. Talk about being in the foxhole. You know, you have all these friends, particularly your first year, where it's like, for a lot of you, it's the most difficult year of your entire life. People are breaking down, going through all sorts of life changes, all types of stuff, and you're there for each other, you know, for the most part. And you're hanging in there, and you're enduring these horrible things together. But you know that because other people are going through this experience with you, you know, the burden is shared. And so it's interesting that I oftentimes pair the idea of family with adversity. Families oftentimes people who are walking with you through the fire. That's people that you know, you share blood with, or if it's just that shared experience. But I think that's a lot of what informed my idea of family and Beasts.
I definitely took the route of where I killed off the parents at the very beginning. There are not really any parents in it, but you definitely feel their presence throughout the books.
I killed the moms. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
There are no dads. There are no fathers. Oops. I have a very wonderful dad. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Like, great.
Like, don't get it twisted.
Don't get it twisted. Like, I have like a really great dad.
I feel like my dad was a little bit bummed out that I didn't dedicate the first book to him. Like, and I had to explain to him. I was like, Dad, all the parents are dead in this. Like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say like the dad character dies in the second chapter in this book.
Dang.
So like in a brutal way. And so I was like, Dad, if I dedicated this book to you, like that would maybe you said the wrong message.
You really stuck your dad in the fridge.
I did. I fridged the dad.
You know what's funny? Somebody asked me once, like in an interview, you write YA, you write romance. What do all at this point I had what all seven of your books have in common? And I had to really think about it, and I was like, you know what? Daddy issues. So, across the board.
I'm gonna behave. Your family came.
Yeah. but it is like you said, right? It's if the parents were there, a lot of the plot of these books. A lot of the plots of these books would not actually happen. So sometimes you have to like get the parents out of the way for like interesting things to take place.
Because kids need to sort of be free without them sort of hovering.
Yes.
To do
So
all the
sometimes
things.
in fantasy, the easiest way to do that is to just. But moving on, all of you also have created these really visceral, made like really deep fantasy worlds that readers can just fall into and lose themselves. And so I was just wondering how you created those, and if you pulled from any real world settings or historical moments or anything of that nature when you were creating them.
When I set out to write Labyrinth Lost, what turned into the Brooklyn Bruja series, I said, what if it was like Charmed, except they were all brown, and the magic all came from Latin America? And so there is no handbook for brujeria. Like, brujeria is just the Spanish word for witchcraft. There's no handbook for it. There's, you can't go into the store and like read Olive Silver Ravenwolf's, books on
Don't
spells.
hate on her.
And I love her.
I
okay?
love her too. I still have her books in my trunk.
She formed my adolescence with like all her spells, and I would like make good luck spells before having a test and stuff like that. So a teenage Wicca. and so when I was creating the magic in Labyrinth Lost, I started pulling from different things of Latinx cultures, and predominantly I think it's because Latino people are really superstitious, so it's really not a far-fetched thing to create spells that actually come to fruition and happen. So for me, it's like that magical realism, but like the magic is real, and it's part of the culture. And then I just took it a step further and made gods for them, because what I love about fantasy is creating a magical system. So I had to ask myself, who are these witches and who do they pray to? And I created a pantheon based on the Greek gods and the game of Loteria, which is like the cards where it's like those little paintings, and I personified emotions. So like the god of love is like El Corazon, and which is also a Maluma song.
I've been tortured with Maluma. So I've been looking at his pictures, his Instagram. I hear him in my sleep.
It's actually just me listening to him, and you're just in the same room.
Right, exactly. We've done deep dives on his girlfriend, all for sex. Because we know he's a dog.
You're not supposed to tell people.
You keep outing me on Instagram.
Okay. So what was I saying?
Torture.
And so El Corazon is like the god of love, but he is the personified emotion. He's a personified emotion. And so I kept doing that. I kept going down that rabbit hole of like taking feelings, giving them Spanish names, and developing them as what they would look like if they were the gods of these witches who lived in Brooklyn and somehow had to straddle the real world and the fake world. How did you create your magic, Dhonielle Clayton?
I was going to make Tochi go next, and then I got to go last. But okay. I write about the things that bother me, so I like petty and I stay mad, basically. And
Same.
right, exactly. So I was just going back to my childhood journals over and over again, and I was so obsessed with my skin because I had really bad cystic acne, and I had a lot of feelings about whether, when I was a teenager, if I could change everything about myself down to my bones, I would have done it. And I was obsessed with magazines, and I wanted to create a world where you could literally change everything. And I wanted to talk about power and what that would do to groups and to an entire world if you could literally change everything about your outside self. And I was very interested in sort of how these hierarchies of people start happening. When you hit like 7th grade, and I was a teacher for a very long time, I was noticing and a lot of my children would journal, and I would write back to them in their journals, and I couldn't understand why. In 7th grade, literally friend groups start kind of coalescing based on what that kid looks like. Whether or not they have acne, whether or not they know how to do their hair, whether or not they know how to dress. All of these sort of external factors start dictating who hangs out with who gets the most attention. And I wanted to lean into that and figure out why that happens. Why it happened to me, why does it continue to happen in every single school that I have seen and gone to in America. This same thing happens. In France, in Japan, everywhere that I have lived, the same thing happens. Even the same 2 fight words. So every time there was a fight, when I was in middle school, you were called ugly or fat. When I was living in Japan, when there was a fight, you were called ugly or fat in Japanese. In France as well. There's something in the human condition that creates this ugliness, and I wanted to lean into that.
That's fat. Well, how did they say world star in Japan?
Ooh, I'm gonna fight you after this.
No, but I think that's
Yeah.
very, very, very fascinating with regards to the, like at that age too, that it seemed like this universal transformation that
12.
yeah, like almost like it's this sort of social virus that washes over. I just find that very fascinating, the universality of that.
Right, and they start clustering and start organizing and have more access to this social currency that I couldn't figure out. And so going across the country and talking about what is the social currency in your high school? What makes someone beautiful? What makes someone popular? What makes someone powerful? And the fact that they can boil it down to your body parts is scary and terrifying, but it's real.
Especially because it's something that most people have zero control over,
Right.
and how it dictates so much of your life. It's fascinating.
Right, and the fact that it is your bones, and we can't change our bones, but in my world you can. And I wanted to explore, what does that afford you? What does that change? How does that change?
And I especially loved how you had this happen as trends, where it's always changing. So as soon as you get a hold of what is currently in vogue and you manage to get yourself at that point, it all of a sudden changes and you're back at square one.
And that came right out of when I was 12 and 13. I remember I was doing this thing where I was putting sun in. I'm old. You can put like all the white girls. All the white girls
I
were
remember
using sun in, right? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it too, right? And then I told my mom, and I was like playing soccer, and she's like, why is your hair turning orange? I was like, it's just conditioner. She was like, I'm not dumb, and your hair is super brown, so you using this product that you're hiding underneath your sink, and I'm nosy and I go through your sink, is not a good look. Because now I have to take you to fix your Ronald McDonald, because you're going to school, and then you're mad and you're upset because people are making fun of you, and it's like a whole thing. So it was because these trends changed, and literally it was like everyone was doing sun in, and then it became like different colors, and I just couldn't keep up, and my hair just didn't work with those. 17 magazine tells lies. You can't get bedhead by just spraying water in your hair and then just zhooshing it. Not when you have an afro, because that doesn't work. You will have a hot mess. And that was my life from like 6th grade all the way through high school. It was a mess. And I wanted to create that in a secondary world fantasy.
I think I'm just really sort of captured by the whole, like, how you appear dictating how you move through the world, because that was very much on my mind when I was writing Beasts. So basically, after you consume a sin and the guilt associated with it, the animal appears on your body as a tattoo. And for most of the Aki, the sin eaters who can do this, their tattoos fade. But for Taj, the main character, his tattoos don't. And one thing about being Aki is that everybody can see that you're Aki. Like, you can try to wear clothes to cover it up, but as soon as anybody gets a glimpse of what's on your skin, like, they know that you're someone they can spit on or step over or cheat out of a meal or what have you. But like the twist there was that, they have this incredible, it's a gift or like a power. It's this really incredible thing that nobody else can do. And it's supposed to be empowering, but at the same time, it severely restricts how they're able to move through the world. So that was, and the obvious parallel being blackness. I mean, let's not.
Are you sure?
I don't
Tell
know.
me more.
Yeah, I don't know if I did too good a job of hiding that. But yeah, it's blackness being, it's like being an X-Men, or being a mutant, actually. I very much glommed onto the X-Men, the animated series as a kid. Like, that was my jam. And it was interesting, too, because, like, Jean Grey could walk through the world with, like, nary... She could pass for human. Like, she could pass. Whereas Nightcrawler, you knew who that dude was. As soon as he popped, like, you could tell, like, who he was and what he was about. And I just thought that was fascinating, just the inherent sort of unfairness of it. So, like, with blackness, there's, I personally find my blackness, like, empowering in the way in which it signals certain aspects of heritage and tradition and the community that it makes me a part of by virtue of just being and looking the way that I look, right? That shared experience, all these people that are in the foxhole with me, so to speak, at least with regards to the American experience, like that very much dictates how I'm able to move through the world. And not just in America, but like in France too, in Paris, like it's very, very, very much a thing. I mean, you also have like the whole colonialism thing, so that,
It's just a little
Just
thing.
that little thing.
Yeah, that tends to...
Un petit.
You just like throwing some Maggi cubes in the soup and just like adding a little extra flavor. That's,
I keep adobo in my bag.
We go on retreat, and this girl breaks out her adobo, and I'm like, really? You think you're gonna starve just because we go to Kansas? You got this? Bring out your adobo? But I'm glad she did, because when we made those fajitas, they were real good.
there you go.
Thank you. You saved us. Because we were in that Kansas grocery store,
We were in
scared.
that Kansas grocery store, and
Scared
there
and
was
twisted.
like an international aisle, and it had like some Mexican
no.
products, some like Japanese products, some like Thai products, and like it was like the Latin products were just like all like taco shells.
Oh
It was great. We were stressed out.
Yeah, and we were like, oh, I need to season my food.
We derailed that. But
Sorry,
yes.
you're being real serious.
That actually feeds really well into what Tochi was saying. Feeds really well into my next question.
Oh, adobo feeds. I see what you did there.
Now I'm just hungry. Okay. So my next question is that it's a big part of the internal conflict in all of your books. This chasm between how they see themselves and how the world sees them, and how they kind of navigate that. And so I was just wondering if that was an important conflict that you wanted to explore, and yeah.
So Bruja Born is the companion novel to Labyrinth Lost. It is both a direct sequel, but you can read it by itself without having read Labyrinth Lost, but you should also read Labyrinth
Good plug. Well done.
And Lula is the oldest sister. So I started from the middle, going to the oldest sister. Book 3 is the youngest sister. Lula has something happen to her in book 1. It's been out for a year and a half, so this is not a spoiler. She gets this creature claws her face, and her whole life she's been told you're beautiful. Like her mom, her aunts, her family, like her friends. It's her identity. And when you're a young girl and you're told this over and over and over again, like this is your identity. How does that change when all of a sudden you have these like scars on your face, and all of a sudden you are not the same person every time you look in the mirror? And that directly affects her magic, and her magic is to heal. And how can you heal when you're broken? So the entire novel is the process of putting her back together, not fixing her, but figuring out a way to live with yourself and to be okay with yourself, and in a reinvention of who you've always been, and sort of like making your magic grow without saying without getting rid of her scars and saying I'm healed now, I'm pretty again, because you can't get rid of that. That's something that's already been done to you, and I don't want to say like all of a sudden she's not pretty anymore, because she's still a beautiful person, but the way that she navigates herself through her society in Brooklyn and the magical society is directly impacted by the way that she feels when she is completely insecure.
Tochi, you have to go next. I have to go. You're being like the good guy on the panel where you let all the women speak first, but like here, I need you to tap in.
You need me to patriarchy it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I need a break.
I got you.
Get ready,
I got you.
Dhonielle. We've got lightning round.
Oh God, I need a break. Your turn.
I never thought that you would tap into patriarchy.
Convenience is convenience, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no.
Sometimes we need the patriarchy.
Sometimes I enjoy it. I'm sorry.
You just gotta flick it on and off. Like, yeah.
I mean, after millennia of the patriarchy, sometimes I think we're entitled to it.
Yeah. Gender roles, you can open that door.
Own choice.
Pick up that bag and help me, please. Patriarchy.
That's why I go to the gym.
Yeah.
Um,
So now, your turn.
Okay. So I think if I remember correctly, the question was sort of regarding.
To be fair, I don't
Are you
think
saying
I
that
asked it
Zoraida
correctly.
just went down a rabbit hole?
No, I'm
Where we
saying she
didn't
gave-
know what the question was?
She gave a lovely and very involved answer, and I am just trying to, in purely patriarchal fashion, match it and improve upon
You're
it.
so nice. I want to just roast her. You're so
You're
nice.
the nicest. It's appearance, right?
No, it's internal motivation, character.
It was
Literally the opposite.
Literally, while your eyes do that thing where like, what's happening?
question about how your characters navigate the difference between how the world sees them and how they see themselves.
Oh yeah, you got it.
I did, see?
I know, she was Tony. It worked.
No, I think it's there's something that the Aki do. Taj is very much revered by this group, this sort of makeshift family, because he has so many tattoos. Like, he's good at what he does. He's the most skilled. He's the best at being what they are. But at the same time, that's the thing that gets them sort of spat on in the street. And so I think it's one of those things where you try, if you're in any way, shape, or form from a marginalized identity, you try to find these moments or these things that you can do where you can, in however small a fashion, reclaim control or reclaim some sense of agency. And it could be little things. Like, it doesn't even have to be like spitting in somebody's onion rings. I'm talking like,
You have onion rings in your world?
No, he doesn't have that.
No, they're onion rings in Nigeria?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
No, but there are like these little things that you can do. Like on Vine, for instance. R.I.P. Vine. R.I.P. Vine. Or like 85% of the Vines I watch were these dope black kids from Atlanta making up dope dance moves, right? And like, that was so much of my experience of it. And, you know, nobody had to tell them to do this. Nobody could control it. It was just, like, literally them in a gas station parking lot while, like, Migos was playing. And they would have the illest dance moves that I'd never seen before. And you could tell in those moments that they were in complete control of themselves. Like, nobody was dictating any of the conditions of their current experience. So moments like that, moments when you can get together with others like you, where you can tell stories, where you can, you know, listen to each other or speak and know that you're being listened to and not judged or what have you. That to me was very, very, very important, and that I think is the fulcrum, sort of at the basis of those two things. You know, how they know that society views them versus how they view themselves. I think agency, you know, especially if you're from a marginalized background, is so, you know, it can be so difficult to claim for like 23 out of the 24 hours of the day. And then for that 1 hour that you do have to, like, you know, do you, that's super, super, super important. So making sure that you can do that, I think is a big part of how the Aki sort of act around each other.
And I think it's important, especially with teenagers, because so
Oh,
much of
yeah.
teenagers' lives is them being told who they are. And they're also getting to the age where they can say, no, this is who I am. And so that was a big part of reading your book for me, was that moment where it says, no, this is who I am.
What I love about this question, too, is it made me think, while you two were talking, is why I chose to do what I did. And when you're talking about character motivations and how the outside world sees you versus how you see yourself, I wanted to talk about how we lie to girls and how we lie to women about the value of their bodies and what happens to their bodies when they become sexualized. And so I wanted to create a world where their bodies were treated like food. That's why I use so many food metaphors. They are literally consumed.
I thought you did it just to make me hungry.
I also did it to sort of, you know, there's that writing adage that says, oh, don't describe people related to food. I got a lot of nasty notes. They're like, you used food, and Angie Thomas didn't use food in the hit you gave, and she said it wasn't okay, so you shouldn't do it, so you're a racist. And so I got a lot of those things, and I was just like,
white people though, is my question.
no. The reason I did everybody.
No, the criticisms, were they from white people?
Yeah, they were from white
Yeah.
people. So, yes.
You said she had chocolate-colored skin.
Exactly. And
I
so,
was told you're not allowed to do that.
right, and it's
By Apple Care.
exactly. So funny. The reason I did it was the reason the writing thing exists is because a lot of the times people of color would show up on the page where everybody was normal, and then the brown person would show up, and they would be mahogany or chocolate or cafe au lait, and things that were literally traded for their bodies in the transatlantic slave trade. Literal things that were traded for them. And so it became this disgusting way to describe the other that showed up on the page. And I also wanted to talk about how when I looked at magazines as a teenager, and I looked at Cosmo, and I looked at Marie Claire and 17, and then I saw the magazines for the men, when you saw women in those magazines, and women were laid across cars and in all of these sexually suggestive positions, they magazines, and the way they were positioned were for consumption. And I wanted to talk about the lies that we tell girls as they start to become older, that they're supposed to be beautiful, they're supposed to be sweet, they're supposed to be agreeable, they're supposed to walk through the world and allow people to enjoy them, right? I remember my grandmother used to be like, let people enjoy your beauty. What does that mean? Right? Like, or don't skin your knees. Don't stay outside too long in the sun, because then no one will be able to enjoy your beauty. There were all these things that were told to me as a kid and a teenager that I wanted to sort of use. And so the Belles can create beauty, and they've also been lied to about their position. They were told that they were sort of almost like gods, and then they realized that they are not once the reality kind of sets in. And I wanted to show that girls are also told lies, and boys are told lies about girls and about themselves and about power. And I wanted to sort of play with that and say, so that teens could look at it and figure out, well, how do I have ownership over my body? How do I become okay with it and not want to change it? How do I not allow someone to consume it or dress it up so that it can be consumed, so that it's not a prop in someone else's sort of story?
And with the Belles, I thought it was really interesting because they're seen as these chaste, like paradigms of virtue. They're supposed to be untouchable, and that in and of itself sexualizes them. And yeah, I thought that was really, really well done. And
Because that was
amazing.
the sort of framework that I grew up in when I learned about sexuality. I went to Catholic school. Girls, literally, my sex education was girls are supposed to be like flowers, and you should not give your petals away because no man is going to marry the nub in the middle.
Like,
And I was like, oh, I'm going to be the nub.
It's a very involved metaphor.
That was what the nuns and the brothers, that's what they told us. That literally,
that's
you have to
such a
think of
Catholic
yourself
thing,
like a...
because that's in Jane the Virgin. That's how it starts.
Yeah, you were supposed to be like a flower. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be beautiful and delicate and not give those petals away or give the milk for free. Or I'm not going to buy the cow. It was all of that.
I used to have a manager who would call me, he would be like my little flower because I was so angry all the time, and he would do it on purpose.
So I wanted to, that's why everything is about flowers in my world. I was like mad and angry. And I wanted everything to be rotten because I felt like I was like a little rotten flower, a little rotten
You
egg.
are a rotten egg.
That's what my mom calls me. That's my childhood nickname, rotten egg.
Well, I think this is fascinating, particularly hearing it from your perspectives, because I think, at least the perspective that I bring to my reading, particularly in speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, is that it seems as though, given that there's this treatment of women as sort of the object in the sentence, that they're this mystery that man needs to figure out. I remember I like months back saw the latest Blade Runner movie, which was beautiful, but like really, really, really tough to watch, because humanity, a woman's humanity is a plot point. And the whole movie revolves around trying to figure out how women do the thing that their body is made to do, and how can you manufacture that? How can you figure it out, unlock the key, and then you've unlocked the last level of like Elon Musk.
Then you control it.
Yeah, and then you can control it, and I think that's why both your books are so important, is because they no longer the object but the subject, and also revealing the destructiveness of those lies. I think that's just really, really, really important, and so also just thank you for writing your books.
Part of that, this idea that women are a mystery to men, but men aren't really a mystery to women,
Right.
is because women have grown up.
We're pretty simple. I mean, let's not get it twisted.
Also, though, I feel like women have grown up having male narratives pushed on us from a very young age. Male books are seen as universal, like women can read that, or girls can read those, and it's never the same for boys. Boys are grow up having this idea that girl books are not for them.
Right.
That they are not supposed to read those, so they don't get that same experience of just understanding more.
And we as adult gatekeepers do that.
Yeah.
So I was a librarian and a teacher for a very long time. And whenever those little boys would come in, marching in with their little, 8-year-old misogyny, I would say, look, I don't want to read about girls. And I would say, well, I don't have any books that have vaginas. So I don't know what you're talking about. And then they would literally be like, what did you just say? I'd be like, oh, I said the word vagina because you said you don't want to read a book about a girl. And when I heard the word girl, I just thought that's what you were talking about. And they would get really frustrated. And then I would say, so you've got to figure it out. And then they would finally realize that they can read about any type of kid. And that there were no genitals in my library, no nothing. Because little boys need to be challenged in that regard and pushed to see women and girls as human beings and just like them, and that our stories are also valuable because they literally receive that programming from a very young age, that we are some sort of sequestered area and I'm supposed to read about you all day long and that's okay, and girls do. Little girls don't really self-select in that way. That's why they love Harry Potter. It's fine that it's a boy. They'll read it because it's magic. But the minute you give them a boy a book that has a girl, look at Shannon Hale. She talks about it all the time, how they take the boys out of her presentation.
Yeah.
And
There's princess in the title.
Right.
I think Shannon Hale actually said that she pointed out that if Harry Potter was Harriet Potter, it would never have been as popular as it was. Because only half the population would think that it was okay for them to read. So what were you guys like as teenagers?
Oh my God, my family's here. They can tell you. I was the most perfect teenager. I behaved. I didn't talk back. Right?
Your eyes are doing the anime twinkle.
No, so as a teenager, I think that I was really frustrated. I was really bored because we lived in Queens. And that's my...
You were so close to New York City!
Wow.
I love that Queens is in New York City, and you're talking about being close to New York
Have
City.
you ever been to Hollis, Queens?
No!
Exactly.
Where I grew up was really boring.
Sorry, I grew up on an island, an hour off the coast of the mainland.
Which island? Because I was
Key
Largo.
Largo.
Yeah.
Key Largo.
See, y'all don't even know about that, like, small-town blue-collar Connecticut. Let me tell you. Okay?
I was in the suburbs, like, with horses and cows.
We did not have that. We had a Wendy's and a park.
Starbucks.
We didn't have it. We had Dunkin' Donuts because it's Queens.
We had cows! That's it!
I would prefer those.
And
cows.
golf courses.
But anyway, so as a teenager, I was really frustrated. I was really angry all the time. Every time because I can't even actually tell a lot of stories right now.
Because you're being watched. Your family's like right back there. It's really hard.
But so I'm trying to think. I'm selecting. When I was a kid, I didn't really fit in any friend groups. So, and neither did a lot of the other kids that that conglomerated with each other. So I hung out with all of the weirdo and punk kids across the street from the school at the stop sign, and then everyone just
The stop sign.
stop sign was like the stop. We just call it the stop, and it was literally across the street from where I met in high school, and you hung out there. Their Converse sneakers and put safety pins on their sweaters and listen to like screamo. And
You can name the bands. This is a safe space.
to like, From Autumn to Ashes and all these Long Island bands. And so those are my friends. Like and so we kind of, because we didn't really fit in. Like I grew up in a very, very culturally diverse neighborhood. So what kids sort of conglomerated into their country groups, and so all the Latino kids who were not actually born in the countries that they all wear their flags in their back pockets, but they weren't actually born in those countries. And as somebody who was born in the country that they profess to be from, I was really frustrated with that because I didn't want to I didn't need to prove my Latinness by listening to reggaeton and dressing a certain way. I wanted to dress the way that my mom would get angry with me for. And so I was really bratty. I was angry, and I wanted to look like a girl in an Avril Lavigne video.
Didn't you dye your hair red?
I did. My Aunt Janet actually, who's here, she helped me try to dye my hair pink, but she tried to help me course correct it because I had dyed.
A little too much to the left.
Yep, I had bleached my hair, but my hair is so dark that I only did it once, and I didn't have enough bleach. So I just had chunks of it, and then we put pink on top of it, and then it washed out right away. So I had this horrible copper burnt orange thing going on, and
Ronald
my
McDonald.
mom didn't let me change it because she said, "You did that."
I agree. My mom did the same. I think it's like a brown mom thing. It's
It's just there you go.
and you're not bleeding, your legs aren't broken, and I fed you. You're good.
I had a friend who her dad said he'd get as many piercings in your ears as possible, nowhere else. And in high school, she was like, "I'm gonna get my belly button pierced," and he's never gonna know. She came home and she had a shirt, and he looked at her and he was like, "What's in your belly button?" And he made her take it out. It left a scar, and he was like, "That's what you get."
Yeah.
So it's white parents too, man. They are.
And from the South too. They don't play.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have a big ass tattoo on my left arm. Mom still doesn't know about it.
Dare you do that to your Nigerian mother like that? She's gonna send you to the village, and then you're gonna be upset.
No, but actually though.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just a vacation.
No.
Well, 5 years later, I'm still on vacation.
In the village. Yeah.
I was so proud of my I got my tattoo my sophomore year in college, and I was so proud of it because it was my first big rebellion, and my parents were furious with me. But a month later, not even a month later, a few weeks later, my brother decides to get a tattoo, and he's always been the rebel in the family, and so I was like, damn it. he gets a tattoo of a hula girl on his back.
Oh.
Topless hula girl. And I was like, and I'm back to being the good child. Just like that.
But you know, we can hold it. We can call your mom. We can hold it over you.
Oh, blackmail.
We did that to one of my uncles. Like him and his husband got matching tattoos, and so for like solid years, we would be like, oh, if you don't do this, we're gonna tell your mom, we're gonna tell my grandmother, and then they would behave and they would be nice.
So
You do
mean.
that to me?
I would not do that to you though.
I was just, no surprise, grumpy. And I felt like I was like a little cat. I just wanted to be under a table, reading my books, not really talking to them. They don't read, but they watch. I have to behave.
Do you know that, Zoraida?
You don't know that. You're allergic to animals. You don't know that. So, but I would just hide and sort of read, and I was grumpy, and I felt like I was like born on the wrong planet. I was really moody and just into my crafts, my books, my journaling. And as a teenager, it became more of the same, where I was just super, super grumpy.
When you journaled, when I journaled, I wrote to my journal as if somebody was going to read it one day.
No, I did not.
And I think I did that because my uncle actually read my journal.
You know, he was reading it. See, my mom read my journals, and I knew she was being very nosy, so I used to leave her little drawings of things that are inappropriate to like shock her because I knew she was looking. But which is you outed me. So I was just like very private and just grumpy all the time. Like Harriet the Spy, but always. If you ever read that book, that was like when I saw that book, I was like, that's me. I have a lot of feelings. I don't know what to do with them.
See, Harriet the Spy made me never want to keep a journal. Because I was like, the whole school's going to find this, and then I'm going to be like outcast, so I never kept a journal because of my fear.
And I was just
Harriet
like,
the Spy.
shrug emoji, find it. Be mad, stay mad.
Stay back.
Stay mad. This is how I felt.
I think we've only got a couple minutes left, so do you want to go and then maybe time for an audience question or two?
I was busy as a teenager in typical Nigerian fashion. So I went to a boarding school for high school. And,
Of course you did.
You know, I gotta live the stereotype.
Yeah.
I have to.
So you just say in the Nigerian accent then.
So I went to boarding school.
I'm such an ass. I don't have an accent. My accent was taken from me. I need to hear it.
Okay, Killmonger.
Deeply attached to him. I was mad. If I had had Wakanda when I was in middle school, I would have been okay.
I agree with T'Challa. You were wrong to keep that child away. You should have taken him back. But yeah, so
Oh my God.
I did everything in high school. The one thing that mom made sure she drilled into me very early on was to take advantage of every opportunity that was put in front of me. And because I'm loath to disobey my mom in any way, shape, or form, except for the tattoo, I really took it to heart. And so sports, theater, etc., etc. But it was also around the time that I'd really gotten into writing. And so in addition to doing all the other stuff, instead of like really kind of having a social life, I was writing. And I think that's where I was finding a lot of myself. I was also really bad with girls because I couldn't figure them out because of patriarchy.
That's a good answer. They're a mystery.